Armstrong famously said, "One small step for man, one giant leap for mankind," and his biopic First Man showcases the person behind the myth, the legend, the person who stood on the moon for the first time. Now, how could any of us understand what it means to be told that you couldn't do something, that because it hasn't been done before, it's not going to happen, that it was impossible, and that we were stupid for trying? Yeah, that's something that constantly people are being told, and mostly those of us who dare to strive for anything greater than the life that has been foretold before us by people around us, and what we may have believed for a time should be our story. But Neil Armstrong didn't allow these people and their thoughts and their theories stop him from pursuing the one goal that he had. And the story behind the man is one that is filled with just true things that all of us will eventually face. Within the first few scenes, we see him play with his daughter, Katie, who we learn has brain cancer and that she dies within the first few years of her life. Now he has to deal with this grief as he continues his work at NASA, where he is forced to face death constantly. He sees his friends die in these missions, and he himself is very close to death multiple times. But how do you keep going? How do you continue to pursue this dream when everyone tells you it's not possible? And the reason I'm getting emotional is it's difficult and it's hard to, in the face of everything, to continue and to say, this is my life and this is what I want to pursue. And he had just about everybody against the mission except for the people who were standing right there with him. And even then, he was still at odds and with the people that he was on this journey with. And the first thing that really stood out to me is that he didn't allow his emotions to get in his way, and that he didn't allow what happened to keep him stuck. He carried the belief within himself that this was a noble pursuit and one that he wanted to continue. Whether or not others were able to see that for him, he saw it, and that was enough for him. He kept the memory of his child throughout the time that he was pursuing this goal, and he had to tell his wife, you know what, I know that this is difficult and that I may not come home, but this is something that I have to do. And he had to let people stand by the sidelines and think whatever they were going to think. And though we have emotions, though we can be sad or inspired, it is up to us to put it in check and say, I am feeling something, and that doesn't mean that it's a fact. It doesn't mean that it's the truth, whatever I think. I have to move past what everyone else is telling me, what even I am telling myself. And though we don't see the dialogue that he has with himself, which I think was pretty strategic from their point of view to say, we don't actually know the inner workings of a person who is able to achieve something like this, who is able to see many of his friends die. I think they had like 12 funerals that they went to, that he still pursued it. We don't know what the inner workings are, but based off his interactions, there was a goal and he was going to pursue it, and he spent every waking moment dealing with it. And even at the end, his wife told him, you need to sit down with your kids and tell them that you might not be coming back. I know you want to not deal with these emotions, but you have to. So there's this fine balance that he had difficulty with, but if he let his emotions constantly drive him, he wasn't going to be able to achieve it. And you should consider your emotions and deal with them and process them, but understand when it's your emotion and when it's somebody else telling you that this is how you should feel or this is what's actually going on. You have to be the one to put a distance between yourself and say, I don't know what's going to happen, and there is fear there, and I am scared, and I do know that people died, but this is something I'm going to pursue. And he had to face his kids and tell them along the lines that I might not come back tomorrow or in a week, or I think it was 4 days. But he did, but he had to face them and say, I might not. And his kids were very young. I think they were like 8 and 11. And that's hard when you are a child to watch your parent put this dream in front of everything, even them. And there's a lot of questions there. Like, do you pursue this relentlessly even when you have children? And the thing is, it's your life. Whether you do have kids or a partner or parents or siblings, it's still your life. And at the end of the day, the best thing you can show those kids is that you're pursuing the life that you want, and that there are days where you might feel guilt for doing that, but the dream that you have is worthy of being pursued, and that it is your life that needs to be lived as well. So your emotions will be part of your life, and they help us process the world around us, but they're also things that need to be processed, and that it doesn't need to be on a public stage. Very few times he ever shared with anyone what he was going through, not even his wife and not even his closest friends, because he knew that it was his emotions and he had to deal with them and he had to put them in check. When he was getting on a mission, he could not think that 5 seconds from now the rocket might explode and he would be dead. That wouldn't help him, and that wouldn't get him to where he needed to, which is exactly how he was able to deal with a situation where he went out into space on Project Gemini. And fun fact, Google's AI system is also called Gemini, and the reason both of them are called Gemini is because Gemini and the zodiacs the zodiacs are all based off constellations, and the Gemini constellation is based off of twins. And the Project Gemini within NASA was 2 people on this flight, and Google not only did it as a tribute to the NASA Project Gemini, but to the idea that AI is a simulation between what human intelligence is and what it could be, and that it's those 2 things coming together. Fun fact, I didn't realize that until I heard it in the movie, and I was like, is this why Google named it? And it was. But he was on this mission, and he was supposed to connect with a satellite, and they were supposed to stay there for about 12 hours to gather some data. And at some point, their capsule, their spaceship that they were in, just suddenly started turning and turning and turning. And the G-force started increasing. So the amount of pressure in the thing that they were in started to increase, and this is what they're trained for constantly, to see how long they can deal with that before they pass out. And he basically was able to withstand forces that pretty much nobody else has ever been able to in this moment, to deal with this and to get it to stop. And so he was not only dealing with insane amount of fear and NASA down there being really upset that this had happened and having to answer for it. And then when he came back from space, he had to answer for it again. And he had to keep his emotions in check. And he decided to detach from the satellite, and they actually ended up spinning faster. So instead of it being the satellite's fault, it was the ship's fault itself. So he had to deal with even more spinning. But he was able to do it, and they were able to safely come back. And he faced a lot of backlash from NASA itself for an amount of time. In the papers, people were saying, how could you possibly make that choice? And at the end, they were like, well, he survived, and that's all we really have to say. You don't know what you would do in that moment. He figured it out. He's safe. And so is this the person he went on this journey with as well. So you have to keep your emotions in check, because when you're on this journey and everybody thinks you're going to fail, there are going to be times where you think you actually might, where you actually are that close to just deciding, I can't do this anymore. And you have to be able to push past that. You have to be able to say, I didn't get this far to only get this far, and all of my training and all the work that I've done has brought me to this moment because I can deal with it, or I have the tools to deal with it, and I just need to pull them together. Your emotions will go wild regardless of what other people are saying, but you have to be able to put them in check. And he was, and that was why he was able to do what he did. Now, when we are forced to face with other people and what they're saying, how can you effectively just push it aside? And I think it really is. You push that aside because you are actually making progress in the field or the decision that you're making. If you want to pursue opening a flower shop, you need to be putting in the work to do so. You need to be figuring out what the store is going to look like. You need to figure out how you're going to afford this. Where's the loan going to come from? Who's going to work there? How long are you going to give this before you decide that it's not working? Do you have a map? Do you have a plan? And now all of these scientists, of course, did. They were the smartest people in the world, the brightest brains of that generation, and they were putting in the work to do so. They had calculations, they had plans, they had different missions to prove that this could potentially work. Now, if you watch the movie, you will see that there is a progression of different projects and different space adventures that they did before they sent people all the way to the moon. They sent people to the orbit of the Earth, and then they sent other satellites a little bit further. They had different ways to collect data before they were like, we're just going to send people straight to the moon. And of course, there was things that went wrong on those other missions. And when the Apollo journey, the Apollo project started, Apollo 1 didn't even leave the ground before there was a faulty wire and all of the men on board were killed. There are risks that we are going to take, but there are plans that can be put in place. So the next time they put the ship together, they double-checked everything. They triple-checked. They had records of it. They had to change how they did things as they went because no one had done this before. And if you're the first person that you know who is pursuing something, you are the one who's going to have to lay out these plans. And you're going to have to be able to adjust when things go wrong and when you learn something and be able to do so. And if you can't, you will fall to what everybody else is saying because you're not making progress. You have to keep moving forward. If you fall down, you have to get back up and keep going. If you fall down 100 times, you still have to keep going. That is what all of them had to do. That is what the people who were left behind had to do. The people who survived had to do. They were the ones who had to understand that what they went through, the people they lost, couldn't be in vain. That they had to learn from it and they had to keep going. And that is difficult. If you lose friendships, if you lose people in your life, and you have to figure out what the meaning of it is, what is the lesson, and then you have to move on. And that is pretty much what you have to do in life, no matter what it is that you're pursuing. If it's getting your degree, if it's getting a new job, you have to do it in spite of everything everyone is saying and learn from it and move on. You can't be stuck on it. If you go into an interview after the last one was bad and you're like, well, this one's going to be just as bad, you're not going to move forward, and you have to keep going. You have to decide that what you're going towards is more important than what you've been through. And that is exactly what they all had to say. And now we're forced to face with, well, what happens when you get back and you have succeeded? You've done the thing that you want to do. When Neil Armstrong came back and he had to quarantine for a week and then he could see his family again, what happened after that? What was his goal beyond that? He was in his 30s when he effectively achieved the thing that he was searching for. What did he do after? And the biopic also very strategically did not show us that. They didn't show him grow old with his kids or what he went through after that. And it's up to us to decide where we're going to take our story next after we achieve the thing that we do. And to understand that we've achieved it, but it's not the end of our ability to achieve. And that this was one thing to show us that we could do it. And I don't know what the story of Neil Armstrong is outside of what was shown in the movie. And that's really what it is. He was the most famous person in engineering and arguably the world at the time. And yet, I don't know anything else about him except for that 5 seconds of him stepping on the moon for the first time. Most people don't even know that the engineers on these ships, these spaceships, were engineers. Hidden Figures is something that a lot of people learn about or have heard, or if you've watched it, and it shows that everybody else was doing the math, and the people that who were going onto these spaceships didn't know about it, and that other people were doing the math for them, which isn't true. These people on the ships had to do the math in their head as they were flying in no gravity spaceships with no room to move. Not only were they doing math, they were doing it in the most difficult circumstances possible, and very few people fully are aware of that. And we don't know really what happened after that. I grew up hearing about Neil Armstrong, and he inspired a lot of engineers to become engineers. But we don't know what happened after. Did he stay in NASA? I don't know. Probably. But that's the thing. Even if you become world famous for the thing that you're pursuing, that famousness is finite. It is up to you to assign the value and worth into what you're doing. If you're doing this for some grand prize at the end, you're probably not going to get it. No one's going to remember your name, most likely, and in 200 more years, how often are people going to mention Neil Armstrong? Now, it's only been 50 years since it happened. In another 250, who's going to know? Who's going to care? So what you're pursuing is for you. And if nobody's going to care in 250 years, should I still do it? You're not doing it so that somebody else can validate it. And you're also not doing it because other people told you should or you shouldn't. You have to decide that this is worth pursuing, and that pursuit is in pursuit of something that means something to you. You have to be the person to assign meaning in your life. No one else can do it for you. And retroactively, it doesn't matter. And if Neil Armstrong had never succeeded to be the first person to walk on the moon, was his career a failure then? And again, the only person that can decide that is truly him, and everybody else's opinions don't matter. Maybe he wanted to go to the moon and then he wanted to pursue going even further in space. What if he kept moving the goalpost, right? What if he was like, well, I got on the moon, I want to go to Mars next, or to even further, I want to go see the Milky Way, or I want to get to a black hole. If we keep changing the goalpost, does that mean our previous successes don't matter? And for a lot of people, that's usually how success goes. Oh, well, I'm a millionaire. I have $1 million, but what if I had 15 million? What if I had 100 million? What if I had this great job that pays me this amount, but I could get that job and have a corner office and have all these things? You could pursue things for the rest of your life. Things as in physical stuff in your house, things as in accolades, things as in attributes to who you are as a person. Oh, I've read 1,000 books, right? What does any of it mean to us? What does the life that you're living mean to you? And Neil Armstrong had to get very clear with himself that he had this pursuit and he achieved it. He landed on the moon and he walked on it. What does it mean to you to achieve this goal? And when you achieve it, what happens after that? Are you going to just move the goal and get a bigger goal, and then what you just achieved isn't good enough? And for a lot of us, that usually is what it is. How can we step back and say, I did this? Regardless of what everyone said, regardless of what I thought, regardless of all the hard moments, I did this. I made it happen. It's another proof to you that you can do this stuff. But you have to decide, what are you chasing? Is it more goals? Is it an emotion? Is it a feeling? Is it a type of life? Which asks the bigger question, what do you want from life? He had kids. He had a wife. He had a job that was stable. And if he decided never to go up in space again, NASA would have given him another job and he would have had plenty of money. But what is it? What does success look like for you? What does it feel like? What does it mean? You have to decide that. And when you look at your life and you look at the things that bring you joy and accomplishment, what are those? For me, when I achieve something, it's usually because I've worked hard for it. I've created something that's useful for someone, but it's also new and it's applicable in a variety of ways. That seems pretty broad. How do I apply that with my job? How do I apply that with my friends and family? How do you apply the things that actually bring you joy and excitement and fulfillment? How can you apply that in different ways in your life? When he landed on the moon and came back, maybe he started to focus on being with his kids and sharing the stories and creating a better relationship with him, because while he was pursuing space, he couldn't really do that. He couldn't spend hours with them. Maybe he shifted and prioritized that. You can do all of these things, and all of them can make you happy. You just have to decide what is making you happy right now, and is this the thing that I actually want? You get to ask yourself that today, tomorrow, and every day after. It's actually your obligation in this world. What are you doing and why? And if you're doing it to spite someone, if you're doing despite what they're saying, you have to figure out your reason and to accept your life is in your hands, just as his was in his hands, and he got to the moon and he came back. What is your going to the moon? How are you going to get there? Most importantly, what are you going to do when you get back? What is it doing for you? Have you seen this movie? Have you thought about Neil Armstrong this way? Do you know anything about him? And most importantly, let me know what your thoughts are about life and where you want to go. Where is it? Is it right here? Is it in a different place? How are you going to achieve it? Let me know. I can't wait to continue this conversation. And if you enjoyed this talk, we talked about Beetlejuice recently and how you move on from the past. And we also had another movie about Neil Armstrong and that entire extravaganza called Fly Me to the Moon. And we looked at how do you deal with things that are fake. So I'll talk to you very soon. I hope you have an amazing week.